the three-man weave, Diddy has three options. Can the judge deny all three? Let's get into some of this straight game.
Blackjack. Life is like those cards. It's not what you dealt, but how you play it. Play each situation correctly. I remember they used to laugh at a brother.
Welcome back, guys. Welcome back. It's your boy Delray, Richardson, platinum artist, platinum songwriter, Straight Game TV. Thank you for tuning in this evening, ladies and gentlemen. I understand what Diddy's trying to do. Hell of a strategy. And we're going to see. First of all, I'd like to invite everybody back. Your boy Delray, Richardson, platinum artist, platinum songwriter, Straight Game TV. Diddy's team filed a 60-some-odd page memorandum, if you will, to the judge with various legal arguments, cases, and precedent involving the situation, and they're basically asking for either an acquittal, right, or a new trial. But they also filed for new bail. So that's three different things. And the question is, JP6 Gunner, Rodney, Rob M. The question is can the judge actually, with a straight face, deny all three after now seeing what happened in his courtroom and what was allowed to be done? Like I said, hit the thumbs up button, ladies and gentlemen. I'm gonna wait for a couple of other people to come in here so we can get into this great conversation this evening, ladies and gentlemen. Shout out to Rodney 3121. Yeah, wait for a couple other people. We got some people outside based on the few people that we got up in here so far. We got some people outside the chat too. Shout out to y'all too. Ain't no need to hide. You can come take the ride. It's all good. But yeah, this is very important, ladies and gentlemen, because when you think about what just happened involving this Diddy situation, yeah. I'm talking about the law. I'm talking about the law. I'm not talking about what you feel, what I feel. I'm talking about what was just done and what was allowed to be done under the circumstances. Like I said, when they say you can indict a ham sandwich, this was one of those instances where you could clearly see that. Like I said, the insatiable appetite for whatever it was or wherever this went down like it went down, I don't know. I know the civil case. I know all of the things that were said in the civil case. So I'm going to get into it. The attorneys for Diddy basically filed a motion, a 62-page motion, ladies and gentlemen, 62 pages. So you know that this has been on their mind for a while. That's a lot of legal wrangling and trying to argue the case effectively and efficiently. And they filed it with the United States District Court. The Southern District of New York argues that, in part, the Mann Act, ladies and gentlemen, the Mann Act, the law under which Combs was convicted in July, right, on 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution, was too broadly interpreted to apply to Combs because there was insufficient evidence that Mr. Combs transported anyone. And that truly was. Like I said, they never linked it to him saying that he personally called somebody and said, hey, man, can you X, Y, and Z? There was testimony about that, but they never proved that he actually did that, right? This is Diddy's legal team trying to make their argument. So basically, they say it was too broadly interpreted, and that to apply it to Sean P. Diddy Combs, there was insufficient evidence that Mr. Combs transported anyone with the intent to engage in prostitution. Even it includes any sex for money, right? The italicized any, right, is included in the filling, if you will. So basically they're saying that, hey, you know what? They didn't prove that the things that they were alleging, it was just a far reach, man. Like I said, I understand, man. When we look at things sometimes, we see successful people, and some people wish that successful people fall. They build you up to tear you down. The media, the hype, all of the I would say, you call it like the sex, drugs, and rock and roll. You know what I'm saying? SDR, right? Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right? But the motion that they filed further argues that the Mann Act doesn't prohibit Combs' conduct because he lacked a commercial motive and did not intend for paid escorts to have sex with him, right? So now, that's very important, because usually when you see somebody get charged with solicitation of prostitution or whatever, from that perspective, you see it involves like a John, trying to go and, maybe solicit what they have out there sometimes as undercover female police officers, right? And, the proposition is made, the amount of money is talked about, and before anything can happen, you see the other officers swoop in, and the rest would be considered the John, right? So what Diddy's team is arguing, said for the motion further argues that the Mann Act doesn't prohibit Combs' conduct because he lacked a commercial motive, right? And did not intend for paid escorts to have sex with him. That's a argument that they can make, you know what I mean? And like I said, with the italics, again, a part of the filing, if you will. The motion also states that upholding the convictions would violate the First Amendment, because paying people to film them in sexual performances is protected under the First Amendment activity, right? So be it, Cassie, be it the escorts, be it anybody filming them while they were doing what they were doing, their argument, and I'm sure they have case law to basically follow up with their argument, or the judge, probably won't listen to them, if you will, basically stating that, hey, you know what, that's protected by First Amendment. And like I said, when you deal with like any type of porn or anything like that, it's the same thing. Like, you wouldn't be able to do porn if that was the case, for commercial purposes, right? And they're basically saying at a minimum, a new trial is required. The following argues due to a spillover of prejudice from evidence that would have been inadmissible. Listen, the evidence, they're basically saying the spillover, and like I said, once again, when you looked at the trial and you seen what was going on, you could agree to that. Like it was a lot of stuff. Like, what is all of this? You had to ask yourself that question. Like, what was all of this information that they were attempting to bring in? It's like, so they're basically arguing now and say that a new trial is required. The following argues due to the spillover of prejudice from evidence that would have been inadmissible had the Mann Act counts been tried alone. You see what I'm saying? So if they came in and they said, you know what, we're going to charge him with the Mann Act, the same thing that they charged Jack Johnson with, right? As a matter of fact, most people don't know that Donald Trump actually posthumously pardoned Jack Johnson on the Mann Act charges that he faced during his first presidency, ladies and gentlemen. That's why I say that it's not far-fetched that he would pardon Diddy, if you will, right? So now, understand that, right? The evidence that they basically brought up, all this racketeering, all of that, criminal organization, all of that, was a bunch of fluff. They were throwing something against the wall to see if it would stick, right? Now, they're saying if the Mann Acts were charged alone, there would have been a lot of stuff that wouldn't even have been admitted in that case, which is true, under the evidence of the rules of evidence, right? It wouldn't have been permitted to be even argued, right? So that's where they're arguing the prejudice from what was charged versus what he was convicted of, right? So that is the evidence introduced attempted. Listen, they said that is the evidence introduced attempted to prove 2 counts of sex trafficking and 1 count of racketeering and conspiracy on which Combs was acquitted, right? They're basically saying that information was inflammatory and was not admissible to prove the Mann Act accounts. You get it? So they kind of have a great argument there. Will the judge listen to their argument is a whole nother thing, right? Like they said, the jury in Combs' trial acquitted the hip-hop mogul and businessman of 2 counts of sex trafficking, and those are the most serious charges, 1 count of racketeering and conspiracy, right? Listen, you got to understand the evidence that was introduced during this 6-week trial, right, includes witness accounts of Combs hiring male escorts to have drug-fueled sexual encounters with at least 2 women, former girlfriend Cassie Ventura and another former girlfriend of Combs who testified under the pseudonym of Jane. While Combs watched and video recorded the sessions, no evidence was presented to show Combs physically participated in those sessions known as freak-offs. There was no evidence. Listen to what they're saying, because like I said, a lot of stuff, you can assume, that there was evidence, but there was never no evidence presented that he participated in those. They say he was always in the corner, or he was filming, or he was doing whatever he was doing, right? This is the argument that they're making, right? Basically, yesterday is when this motion was also filed. I think it was filed late in the evening. Came after the legal petition for bail again. Now, check this out. I want y'all to understand something, and we got to look at this for what this really is. Shout out to C-Dub, Fatima in the house. Shout out to Fatima, good to see you. Alvin, Antron Lee. Y'all got to check this out. I want you to understand something. So what Diddy's team, from what I'm gathering, what they're doing is they're basically saying this. We gonna file 3 different situations and 3 different motions. On one hand, they're asking for an acquittal, right? On the other hand, they're asking for a new trial. And on the other hand, they're asking for bail. So that's three different, that's the 3-card Molly, if you will. You can pick one if you want to. If you don't want to, you don't have to pick any of them, right? The question is, can the judge legally refuse the new trial, the acquittal, and the $50 million bail and be looked at like that's fair? Diddy was convicted under 2 counts of the Mann Act. And what they're basically saying is there was no evidence. So now the prosecution has to respond in kind and actually go and file an opposition motion as to why they think that the argument made by Diddy's defense team is crazy or is unlawful, if you will, right? And so now when they try to do that, we're going to see whether bail gets denied, new trial gets denied, or he's acquitted based on the evidence and the information, that they're presenting at this particular time, right? So now, he's saying, I want to get out on bail. Listen, Diddy's team is also arguing, ladies and gentlemen, we must understand this. There has literally never been a case like this one, where a person and his girlfriend arranged for an adult man to have consensual sexual relations with an adult long-term girlfriend as part of a demonstrated swingers lifestyle and has been prosecuted and incarcerated under the Mann Act, ladies and gentlemen. Let that sink in. Mark Agnifilo basically said that they went over 100 cases. They hadn't gone over every Mann Act case that has ever been, tried, convicted in federal court or whatever. But he said that they went over, all of these cases, over 100 cases. And he said there has literally never been a case like this one, where a person and his girlfriend arranged for an adult man to have consensual sexual relations with the adult long-term girlfriend as part of a demonstrated swingers lifestyle and has been prosecuted and incarcerated under the Mann Act. The defense asking for bail. They're basically saying, hey, in the bail motion, they're asking and basically stating one thing. And then they came with this other motion basically saying, hey, we deserve a new trial, if nothing less, or to be acquitted of these charges right here. Right? And so even after the first, when he was convicted of, the judge came up with his own interpretation as to what he thought why Diddy shouldn't be let out on bail. He used the defense's admission that, Diddy was violence prone and so on and so forth. But also he said there was nothing that the defendant could show me at this particular time as to why he should be let out on bail. Now, like I said, I disagree with that. That's somebody unilaterally deciding and saying, hey, I don't trust you. I don't, or for whatever reason they want to come up with and say, hey, I don't think that the only way that a person can show you that they've changed or they regret what they did and they understand, like I said, even facing all of the charges that he was facing, is if you give him a chance to do that, right? From the beginning, we saw where, from what Diddy's legal defense said, that he was supposed to turn himself in the next day, and they locked him up the day before. They made some kind of, and not only did they do that, but they filmed it, and they released it to the media. You know what I mean? So they're saying now, even in this argument for the acquittal and the new trial, they're saying that, hey, you know what? Diddy was targeted. He was targeted from day one based on whatever their observation of him being targeted is. Like I said, we know why the case was brought based on Cassie's civil case. So now we're going to see. The question is, will the judge deny the acquittal, right? The new trial and the $50 million bail request? And if he does, like I said, I feel like, I don't know this for sure, but I think Donald Trump will pardon him. And in pardoning him, he will also pardon Ghislaine Maxwell in the Epstein situation. A 2-for-1, right? Diddy on his situation and Ghislaine on her situation. Like I said, once again, I don't see, and I think the Ghislaine situation is different based on the fact that, her situation, I wouldn't say different because, like I said, for most people who don't really know and didn't really understand the Epstein situation, but Epstein got charged in Florida with the trafficking, and he was granted a sweetheart deal. This was, I think, when George Bush was in office, and the prosecutor in that situation was fired, but he gave Epstein a hell of a deal, and in that deal, Epstein signed and his attorney signed papers basically saying that none of his co-defendants, anybody who was affiliated or associated with him at that particular time, could be later charged with any kind of crime, right? Ghislaine Maxwell right now is, her case, I believe now is going to be heard before the Supreme Court, and that's what their case is arguing, that Epstein made a deal, and the deal included her as his assistant and alleged co-conspirator in that situation. And she was never supposed to be tried and locked up in regards to that. Now, that may seem unfair. And morally, it is. You know what I mean? Based on what they alleged to happen, based on what Epstein was charged with, based on what he was actually convicted of in the situation involving in the Florida situation, right? Before he was locked up in Manhattan. And what they say allegedly he committed suicide, right? So now, the Diddy situation in that scene is different. There were no underage girls. All of these people were consenting adults. All of these people were over 21. Like I said, what they were alleging, Diddy was basically, you would basically put him in the position of a John, or what people, what players would call a trick, right? You know what I mean? There was no financial motive, like they said in the argument. There was no financial motive for him, like a pimp, would send a girl, and he would be getting money from that a young lady, if you will. That wasn't the situation here. And so with that being said and understood that that's not the situation, they're basically saying, hold on, the Mann Act, what do you mean? And like I said, I told people before, right now, if you go over to the Art of Dialogue, he has Daniel Phillips. Daniel Phillips was one of the people who was the first person to testify in the Diddy case. Daniel Phillips is over there. Him and Howard, right? Clayton Howard, right? They're over on the Art of Dialogue. You got to go watch it. The reason why I say that is because these are two guys that were in the room. And these were guys that are basically saying that, hey, you know what, man? Cassie lied. She manipulated us. You know what I mean? She made us think that it was, even though they were getting paid and all of this, that, and the other, they put those guys in grave harm, because Daniel Phillips has said in one this episode just recently that that they were trying to exchange STD results, and Cassie was always like, I can't find mine. I lost the password. That's just one thing. You got to go over on Art of Dialogue and check it out, man, and check out the entirety of it so you get the full context of it. So I say that to say this. They can then look at Diddy and say, okay, yeah, he's running this massive sex trafficking ring and all of these things like that, right? But when you listen to Daniel Phillips, you hear him say, like, in which he said in court, how he was basically lured to go and even participate in what was going on, under some bachelor party, type of deal. And it's just so interesting now that you could take a step back and you can look at it in its totality. You look at it in its totality. A lot of people, and like I said, there's a lot of things that they're saying over on the Art of Dialogue that they couldn't really say in court, or that they weren't asked in court, if you will. And so I think that's the most important part to this whole story. So when Diddy now asks him for bail and say, hey, you know what, I never intended to have, they did the escorts, and they're saying that also. They never had any kind of sexual relation with Diddy or anything like that, right? So why is it now that, he's been charged with the Mann Act, no bail, no none of this? Oh, we're scared, and everybody's scared. They got the money, and, people file these lawsuits, and, all of this, just going after the money. I mean, I get it. I understand that. I understand that aspect of the game. But like I said, the real question is now, will the judge, knowing what he knows, seeing what he's seen, right? And knowing that Donald Trump is lurking in the background, this is three opportunities for the judge to say, hey, you know what? You can't be wrong in all of these. You can't be wrong like, hey, man, you know what? The man is asking for a $50 million bail. They're putting up the restrictions. They're saying this, and so on and so forth, right? Okay. If the embarrassment wasn't enough, okay, he says, no, I don't think he deserves bail, right? Based on what? Based on, like I said, you've seen people who have been charged with murder get bail, ladies and gentlemen. It's happened before. You know what I mean? Or worse charges than that. Like I said, they gave the Abercrombie and Finch guy bail. He was charged basically with the same thing as Diddy was charged with. Why he was given bail and Diddy wasn't? And this was before. They're saying now before sentencing. He tried it before, before the trial. And so, like I said, once again, I'm talking about law. I'm not talking about what I feel and being on Diddy's side and, all of these Johnny-come-latelys who don't really understand how to think critically about certain situations. I'm talking about law, because when these lawyers, they put up these arguments. It has to be based on law. It can't be based on their feeling. Well, I feel like he deserves, bail in this. It can't be based on that. It has to be based on law and precedent. And that's what they're basically arguing. And they're saying, hey, look, in this situation, we've never, what he said, right? The Diddy's defense said there has literally never been a case, ladies and gentlemen. You got to understand how, difficult this is to swallow, like this one, where a person and his girlfriend arranged for an adult man to have consensual sexual relations with an adult long-term girlfriend as part of a demonstrated swingers lifestyle and has been prosecuted and incarcerated under the Mann Act, ladies and gentlemen. That's basically what Diddy's in jail for. You get it? And it's never happened before. Point blank, period. So now, are we setting new legal ground? Are we setting new legal precedent with this case involving Diddy, right? Right? So in that situation, they're basically asking for bail. And now, when they say that they went over all of these cases, the reason why they did that is because when they make that argument, they're going to make sure that there's no case where you can actually find a situation like that, where two consenting adults hired some kind of sex worker to come in and have a swinger lifestyle, a threesome, or whatever they was doing, right? And that person in that situation, just like Diddy, was charged with violation of the Mann Act. It simply is not so. And then not only that, but like I said, once again, to have Cassie be one of the co-conspirators, when you understand what Daniel Phillips and Clayton Howard is saying over there on the Art of Dialogue, to be one of the co-conspirators, the orchestrator of this situation, right? She wasn't charged. She wasn't charged. And so now, once again, are we now looking at it? Oh, we seen the tape with the Intercontinental Hotel situation, right? We totally understand that Diddy was wrong for that. They admitted that. But we're not talking about that because the charge wasn't domestic violence. That was part of what happened in their relationship. That was 2016. Never brought to the police, never nothing charged. None of that, right? So if we're going to look at that, you got to look at that through the right lens and not the lens that, I feel like he should go to jail because he did that. No, that's not how it works. Like I said, once again, if that was the case at that particular time, you got to understand how many lies were told. Even the security guards at the time, they were like, yo, this is the only tape, right? They lied. He paid them $100,000 cash. They lied, right? So now, once again, they even got to be worried that, once this is all over, will Diddy file a lawsuit against them? You know what I mean? For lying to him about saying that it was the only tape. And so, like I said, the lies that have been told have been so plentiful. We saw Brianna Bongdalen. We seen her lie. You know what I mean? All the lies that were told. So, like I said, but the argument now is being made that, hey, you know what? A lot of this stuff that was brought into court wouldn't even have been brought in. Brianna Bongdalen, any of these other witnesses, there was no need for that. There would have been no need for that. So once again, there's the defense is saying, hey, all of this was brought in to make this guy look like a monster. And had he been charged under the Mann Act alone, if that's what this truly was about, right? Because that's basically truly what it was about. They were trying to prove sex trafficking, but how could you prove sex trafficking? Now, like I said this before. Now, if they gave a damn about the male escorts, listen to this. If they really truly gave a damn about the male escorts, who were truly the ones that you could say were trafficking themselves, and not Diddy was trafficking them, they were trafficking themselves, or if Diddy was allegedly working with the an agency or something like that to bring these guys and so on and so forth, then you could say that. But that simply wasn't the case. Every time that Daniel Phillips talked about something, he talked to Cassie. And she was the one that orchestrated things. You understand what I'm saying? So now, that's the reason why I say, okay, co-conspirator. So we're going to see, ladies and gentlemen, what actually happens and what comes of this, because this is going to be very important when you think about the big picture. They got a bail motion. they got a new trial motion, and they got an acquittal motion. They're asking for 3 different things. And we're going to see within the next couple of days, I'm sure, whether the judge allows Diddy to stay in jail, Diddy not to get a new trial, and not to be acquitted of these 2 Mann Act charges. Like I said, once again, when you and this is what having good lawyers, and like I said, for most people understand that the average Joe, without the resources and the capital that Diddy has, wouldn't stand a chance. It's a lot of people that been given a lot of time, like I said, once again, who had poor representation in court. You know, like I said, I'm not ready to call the judge biased either. Like I said, because, you know, I guess he's doing what he's doing, how he's doing it, because there's a remedy for that. It's called appeal. It's called an appeal. So whenever you feel like, you know, you didn't get a fair shake, and, you know, and that's why they're throwing up all of these attempts, you know, the bail, the acquittal, and the new trial. They're throwing up all these attempts and saying, hey, you know what? If we can't get this, hey, man, something's wrong. Something's wrong based on the facts. Because like I said, they have to come, Diddy's defense team has to come with facts and case law involving why they believe that Diddy should not be held accountable for these charges, right? That he's been convicted of. And why is that? And like I said, and from what listen, ladies, I'm gonna say it one more time. From what they just said and what it reads like, even just for the bail, listen, and you got to understand this. They've studied the cases, every case, and you can go and you can kind of do the research yourself if you really cared about it, right? But like I say, most people don't really care. So in that sense, you know, that's why, like I say, I try to get it straight game. There has literally never been a case like this one before, where a person and his girlfriend arranged for an adult man to have consensual sexual relations with the adult long-term girlfriend as part of a demonstrated swingers lifestyle, and has been prosecuted and incarcerated under the Mann Act. Ladies and gentlemen, it has never been done. Forget about all of the stuff they charged Diddy with that he didn't get convicted of. That's done. That's out the window, right? We talking about the Mann Act. We talking about just what I just read, you know, from the legal filings, right? The defense letter is asking for bail. Said Sean Combs should not be in jail for this conduct because nobody has ever been in jail for the conduct, and they've done the research to look at it to see what it really is, ladies and gentlemen. This is when you talk about facts versus somebody just saying something and they telling you what they feel. This is about facts. It's never been done before, right? If you don't like Diddy, cool, you don't like Diddy. You know what I mean? You know, if you felt like, yeah, he was wrong for hitting on Cassie, yeah, he was wrong for hitting on Cassie, I agree with you. But we're talking about the law as it should be equally applied, right? There's never been nobody ever in the situation that Diddy's in right now. And you got to ask yourself, well, why is he in that situation? First time offender? The Mann Act, I can't get bail. Oh, he's powerful. He's going to do all of these things. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. If everybody was judged with that, listen, I want you to understand something. If everybody was judged with that same thing, you know what? You got a traffic ticket, right? And you go to court for your traffic ticket, and judge said, I'm taking away your license. And you're like, why? You know what I mean? Because you failed to stop at a stop sign and almost hit somebody on their bike crossing the crosswalk. And he said, you know what? I don't think you deserve a driver's license because that happened, and I don't believe that you won't do it again. That's basically what's being said. Right? What do you mean? Everybody makes mistakes. Did it actually happen like, you know, the person is describing to you? The judge wasn't there. This is evidence being brought into court, being presented in front of him. So, like I said, so when the first time when Diddy asked for bail after he was convicted with those 2 counts, it was like he said that, there's nothing that the defendant can show me right now that would want me to, like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Like, this is the first time you've encountered this individual, and all of the stuff that you've heard, the jury has spoken and rendered its decision Okay, cool. 2 charges of the Mann Act. That's what he's charged with. Can we get bail now? No, I don't think you could get bail because of the violence that was involved with the situation. That violence was in 2016, ladies and gentlemen. Right? Let's go with and this is facts. Listen, let's go with the situation with Daphne Joy, a.k.a. Jane, right? She testified in court that she banged his head up against the marble table because she was jealous about Young Miami, right? That violence right there was not looked at. And like I said, she admitted to it. She threw glasses and bottles and all of that stuff at him. That same domestic violence was not looked at like the Cassie situation was looked at. Why? Because it wasn't caught on film? She testified that she did that. And she was unprovoked. She was mad. She was angry. And then they got into a fight. But once they got into a fight, they chose to focus on Diddy's retaliation for that. And not the antagonistic manner in which Jane, who was the provocateur of that violence. I don't think it's right for nobody to hit nobody if you don't want to be hit back. Man, woman, or nobody else. You understand what I'm saying? Man to woman, the woman to man. I think you should keep your hands to yourself. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times you can't anticipate or predict the reaction that's going to happen based on you putting your hands on somebody else and you thinking that you can do that because you think you big and bad and mightier than they are. It's just as simple as that. It's just as simple as that. So a lot of times, once again, when we look at the facts, right, that was not weighed and measured in the same way that the Cassie situation, and that went to show me, I was like, oh, okay. So they really don't compare. They really don't care about domestic violence. They only care about domestic violence as it is from a man to a woman and not a woman to a man. Let me give you some, and I'm going to give you the same way in the bias in that situation. Check this out. So now, like I told you, if they looked at this same court situation and they said that, hey, you know what, it was the trafficking of the male sex workers, right? If they went and dealt with that, they might have got sex trafficking. They might have got Diddy convicted on sex trafficking, but they didn't give a damn about the male sex worker. They were basically saying that Diddy was trafficking his girlfriends for sex. You get it? So they cared more about the women, which were Diddy girlfriends at the particular time. One of the girls, Jane, Daphne Joy, who he was still paying her rent while she was sitting on the stand actually testifying against this man. Amazing. That's how much they didn't give a damn about the male sex workers. But maybe if they cared about everybody in the situation, under the law, like they were claiming that they did or should have, right? Then he might have got convicted for sex trafficking. Because those are the people who were actually being sex trafficked for money. It was the male escorts. Those were the guys that were being paid, right? And like I said, who were paying them? They came up a couple of times. They said, well, they tried to get Christina Karam, the heard messages, and from the little drug mule dude, they tried to get him to admit, like, hey, where was the money going and who was paying who the money. They really couldn't get that out of him. So they didn't even prove that. You get it? So once again, we see in the totality of looking at this, how it's supposed to be looked at. It just wasn't looked at like that. They wanted who they wanted, how they wanted it, and they didn't give a damn about everything. Damn near everybody that came up in there that was a witness, that they said that was part of this big racketeering scheme, this big criminal organization, right? It was all bullshit. It was all fluff. It wasn't no criminal organization. It wasn't no racketeering ring. It wasn't none of that shit. And the sad part about it is that the people that were watching, and like I said, you deal with people every day, and like I said, people believe what they want to believe, man. It ain't got nothing to do with the truth. They're going to side with whatever side they want to side with at that particular time because that's what they think that they should do. It ain't got nothing to do with the truth. But like I said, when you can step back and be like, you know what? Hold on, man. And take it and say, if I was in this situation, how would I want somebody to look at it? You got to put those type of shoes on. You really do got to put those type of shoes on to really say, hey, hold on, man. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, it's Diddy, whatever. Yeah, he live a weird lifestyle. He like to whatever. Yeah, he like to see his girl get hit by another dude and watch and create home porn or whatever. Okay, that's his personal business. That ain't got nothing. And that's why his lawyers are arguing that it's his First Amendment right, freedom of speech, right, to be able to do those things. Like I said, it's never been done. They brought the tapes in the court, and yeah, it was this, and these guys, and he flew them here, and they flew there, and they went there. They went there willingly. Nobody was coerced. They were being paid. And like I said, what Daniel Phillips said in the court when he first testified is that when he came into the room, he was supposed to get paid $400. He said in the court, he said that Cassie gave him about $3,000-$4,000, and then I think she paid him after he left too. You know what I mean? Under the guise that he was just gonna be doing a little striptease for some bachelorette party. He said he going to the joint. He's like, yo, where everybody else at? And then she kind of broke out the truth. So he was lured there under false pretenses. Think about it, right? When you deal with the aspect of how it was supposed to be actually dealt with. So like I said, we're going to see, man, whether the judge can really look at this and not even worry about what everybody else is thinking and look at it from a real perspective and say, hey, you know what? The guy's charged with 2 counts of the Mann Act. They tried to throw everything at the book. It didn't work. You know what I mean? And now, if they're going to use the judge, like I said, Maureen Comey, she was fired by Pam Bondi in the Department of Justice. It could be blamed for losing this case. It could be blamed for the Epstein situation because she was the one that also worked on the Epstein case. And but they've never really given no reason. You know what I mean? So like I said, but are the other prosecutors at the prosecution office in New York, are they looking at it like, hey, you know what, we got to come right with this, because if we don't, then it's a possibility that Donald Trump will pardon Diddy. Think about it. When you're talking about being fair and being treated fairly, right? In so many situations, like I said, once again, I'll say it again. Jack Johnson, who was charged with the Mann Act for dating white women, right, and taking her, I think, to another state or something like that. He was charged with the Mann Act. Donald Trump actually gave him a post-pardon of 30, 40, 50 years after he received, he was charged under the Mann Act. Donald Trump gave him the pardon, ladies and gentlemen. So like I said, once again, it doesn't seem that far to me where Diddy, dealing with his girlfriends, having, hiring escorts or whatever, and what they're calling a swingers lifestyle, to be convicted under the Mann Act. It's never been done before. It's never been done before. So hopefully, like I said, we'll see what happens, man. Either way it goes, it goes. Like I said, I'm here to bring you the facts. And like I said, for the people in the chat, I appreciate each and every one of y'all, man. Who is that? Corey Lewis, Brittany Lynch, Kathy Rose, what's up? Mellow DC, OOTA, JP6 Gunner, Limitless Fatima. Who else? Who else we got up in here? Killer Rob. Yeah, we got a few people up in here, but it seems like we got more people outside the chat. Shout out to the people outside the chat too, who's scared to be notified and don't want to come up in the chat. Like I said, more importantly, subscribe to the channel. Don't hide. You know what I mean? It's all good. We up in here discussing and having a grown ass man to woman discussion about facts, right? The Aces Wild channel. Sandra Love, what's good? Absolutely. Like I said, so ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate every one of you guys for coming up in here, joining me. And like I said, we're gonna see what happens, man. Like I said, but pay attention to what's going on, because it's very important. Because it don't just affect Diddy, it affects all of us. It's the law. You know what I mean? It's how people gonna be judged. Like I say, when they're able to set precedent in law, they're able to do it to him, they're able to do it to you and anybody after you. Like I say, they did it to Jack Johnson. Mellow DC, thank you for the donation. If they did it to Jack Johnson, they can do it to anybody. They did it to him, and Trump gave him a pardon later down the line. If they do it to Diddy, they can do it to anybody, right? Too highly successful. Jack Johnson was the heavyweight champion of the world, and they did it to him. You know what I mean? And he didn't. It was, like I said, it was more him dating white girls. It wasn't about no Mann Act. It was about him dating white women. Point blank, period. Right? And so now they've changed it, and they've moved the bar a little bit, and they're saying, well, hey, now it's about, if you with your girlfriend and you hire some kind of whatever, and you roll the swinger lifestyle, then that's considered to be what? Yeah, that you violate the Mann Act. So we're gonna see what the judge decides, man. We're gonna see what the judge decides, and like I said, JP6 gonna. I don't think a lot of people get it though. Like I said, once again, they looking at it from this cloud of I ain't got that kind of money like Diddy. But like I said, man, hey, if they did it to him, then they setting a whole new precedent now. So now if they catch somebody else like that, be like, hey, well, they charged Diddy with it, they got away with him. So now it's that trickle down effect. Now it affects people who don't have as much resources that he has. Like I said, he fighting with everything he got. You know what I mean? 10 lawyers, man. 10 whole lawyers. Yeah. I mean, like I said, and not only that they did it to get the bag. Cassie came back later for whatever reason. That was her reasons. She knew a lot of stuff, and like I think Diddy settled it because of the embarrassment. But ultimately, they took him through the embarrassment anyway. Oh well, you know what I mean? And like I said, so with that, yeah, it's hard to really, to say anything about it. But now, like I said, I'm sure he's probably happy that he's done with it, and he wants to come home. It's just a process. It's a process. He got the resources to be able to fight, keep fighting, filing for bail, filing these motions and things like that. And the government's gonna have to, file their response in the opposition to the motions and trying to keep him from being free. But like I said, from what the argument from the defense is, this has never been done. And me reading that, it has never been done. Me looking at some of the cases that involve the Mann Act, it never has been done like this before. Like I said, once again, especially under the circumstances where these women were his girlfriends. Admitted girlfriends on the stand in the courtroom. They're basically saying, hey, we going into your bedroom and we're going to find some shit on you. You know what I mean? We gonna go into your hotel room and we're going to find something on you. You know what I'm saying? Based on this civil case that your girlfriend filed that based on, oh yeah, we was doing freak offs. And like I said, remember, you got to go back and remember when the freak off term came out. Oh man, they was talking about these people with 100 people in the party and celebrities and all of that. It was a bunch of lies, man. People are not talking about that. They wanted it to be the worst shit in the world, and when it didn't come to fruition, they're quiet now. You know what I mean? That's one of the things that people are not held responsible for. It's like when they thought it was going to, like I said, Chris Todd, I interviewed him over on the Art of Dialogue. He's, oh man, I got tapes. I seen tapes with Diddy with underage kids and man, all that shit was lies. It was lies. You know what I mean? And ain't nobody saying nothing about it now, y'all. They ain't saying nothing about it now. That's why you got to be very careful about the information that you take in. They wrote the book. The book came out. They put it on Amazon. Same thing. A bunch of motherfucking lies. Excuse my language. I got, you know what I mean? And because I think it's sad because I don't know what kind of mentality somebody has to be dealing with to be able to do that and then be like, and then all of a sudden when it doesn't come to fruition, they acting like they didn't even entertain that. You had a bunch of these YouTube channels, you know what I mean, entertaining that same garbage. It's like, dude, come on, man. I knew from when I asked the dude, I'm like, yeah, can I see the video? Oh no. And then the guy, Chris Todd, he was like, well, I'm working with the FBI and I'm doing all of this. All of that shit was lies. He wasn't working with no FBI. How could he work with the FBI? And when the FBI came, when they subpoenaed Courtney Burgess to the grand jury, He couldn't even produce no hard drives. Come on, man. See, it's one thing to want somebody to be held accountable for some stuff that they did. Okay, cool. Like, yo, he did it, he held accountable. But it's another thing to want to lie somebody into a charge or something like that just because, some kind of other conspiracy or nefarious or powerful people or whatever you want to call it. It's crazy. It's crazy. And like I said, once again, some people are that vindictive and hateful that they don't mind doing that. But guess what? There's a thing called karma that they're not in control of. And no matter how much money you got, no matter how much power you got, when karma come to get you, she come to get you. She don't have no bias. She come to get you. Man, woman, or otherwise. Right? So that's the thing that I'm talking about. You know what I mean? And so we seen what happened. We seen where the government can come in and say, hey, you know what? No, what you did wasn't that really that bad, even though you was the one that was facilitating it and paying for the male escorts. We ain't really worrying about you. We want him. That's crazy to me. Because that's not about justice. That's about targeting. Right? And so when Diddy's legal team is saying that he was targeted, right? That's what they're saying. They're saying, okay, no, we're going to give you, if they all are part of this situation, no, we're going to give you immunity, right? To testify about something that this person alleged, like Breonna Taylor, right? We're going to give you immunity. You were given immunity, right? Okay, cool. You come in, you testify that something happened on the 26th of this date. They used the metadata from your phone. She testified that it happened on this date, right? When Westmoreland got and cross-examined her and showed that Diddy wasn't even in town on the day that the metadata on her phone said that, right? The prosecution was like, well, she was doing drugs at that. No. Because if you could have gotten away with that, if they didn't have the other information and evidence to show that he wasn't there when she said he was there, then according to them, he was there. Oh, y'all don't have nothing to rebut this? Oh, well, he was there on the 26th then, right? Once they proved that he was somewhere in New Jersey on the 26th, they were like, well, she was using drugs. Now here comes these old garbage-ass excuses, right? As to why it was wrong. No. And you see what I'm saying? This is what we're dealing with. So when people come with that information, it's like, oh, yeah, come in here. Nah, we don't know if that's true. Like I said, proven wrong. He wasn't there. You can't be two places. What's this receipt right here? This is the receipt for what hotel in New York on the 26th? Mr. Combs wasn't even there. Now what? See? Nobody cared about the truth. They wanted the lie to prevail because the lie was much more satisfying to them. I don't know why. You know what I mean? I don't know why the lie was more satisfying. I mean, like I said, once again, but it seemed to be that it was. It seemed to be that it was. Well, not only did Cassie love it, I mean, like I said, Cassie was, she was with it. Like I said, you go over to the Art of Dialogue, listen to Daniel Phillips and Clayton Howard. And they're telling you, despite the narrative that the prosecution was in the picture that they were trying to paint as these women as victims. And I'm not talking about the domestic violence part. I'm talking about specifically in dealing in relation to the free calls. They were all with it. Jane was getting her bills paid. She was the flyers, the Bottega Veneta purses, the Louis Vuitton, the Chanel, the trips, the everything. She was with it. Cassie was too. The Jaguar, the 17, 26, 27 floor condo, all of that. She was with it. She was living in a cloud of rarefied air that very few women, in the presence of somebody like Diddy with the financial resources that he has, they were all with it. It was nothing wrong with it. It was nothing wrong with it. Even so much so that Cassie needed money. We seen what the whole play was. The play was about the money. She filed a lawsuit. He paid it. They were threatening to put out a book. He paid it. She was about to go on tour. This all came up in court. After she got that money, she canceled the tour. She ain't no need to go on no tour. I just got 20 million. I'm straight for life. If you when you invest the money right, simple. And she got 10 million from the Intercontinental. So, like I said, once again, man, and this is the information, like I said, that I've been listening to Daniel Phillips and Clayton Howard and them talking about what actually went on in those rooms, what actually happened in those rooms. We could take anybody, because like I said, anybody else is want to, give us their little side of the story. Like I said, all of those guys, and I'm not saying when I say manipulated, I don't mean that they didn't go there with the intention to get paid. They went there with the intention to get paid because that's what they was doing. That's what they were hired to do. When I say manipulated, I'm talking about in the beginning how they basically set it up to be, oh, it's this, it's that, instead of just keeping it 100. This is what we doing. This is what we into. This is cool. You know what I mean? Like I said, when Daniel Phillips said he went there the first time, it was like, oh, oh no, we don't want you to do no kind of like striptease. We just want you to, this is what we want you to do, and we're gonna pay you X amount of dollars. Right. It was some weird, like I said, like Daniel Phillips said, it was some weird shit. It was weird to him. It was weird. He was like, okay, but I'm here, I'm gonna do it. It is what it is. So when I say manipulate, I don't mean to absolve anybody of their accountability. Like I said, those guys over on the Art of Dialogue right now, they're taking their accountability and saying, hey, yo, this is what we did. This is what we participated in. But also, this is what really truly happened. This is the energy in the room. This is how we communicated. This is how I found out, and so on and so forth. So I think that's very important to put everything in its proper context, right? Like I said, a lot of people speak from their own personal, emotional, I think it was that. I just think he's, no. You can't think that he's this and not think that they're that. You see what I'm saying? Everybody was in there. Everybody was grown. And they talk about like, well, it was the money. No. You can go get a job. You ain't got to be around Diddy. There's plenty of people that left Diddy, man, that went and got jobs. They didn't want to be around him no more. He fired them or whatever happened. They quit, whatever, and they went and got another job. As simple as that. Right? To act like somebody is handicapped by somebody else's riches and all of this is crazy. Right? But only certain people get that argument. You get it? So like I said, once again, ladies and gentlemen, the question is, chime in with the comment. The question is, will the judge deny all three? The new attempt at bail, the $50 million, right? The new trial and the acquittal. We're going to see what happens, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, thank everybody for tuning in. I appreciate you guys. Thanks for the donations. One love. Your boy Delray. Straight gang.
Life is like some cards. It's not what you dealt, but how you play it. Play each situation correctly. I remember they used to laugh at a brother.